Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here at North Palm Beach Airport, Foxtrot 45, taking a look at why you should fly the Milviz Cessna 310R for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So what is the Cessna 310R? It is a light piston twin aircraft, one of the higher fidelity general aviation airplanes available to us in the Microsoft Flight Simulator ecosystem. Today we are running November 866 Tango Whiskey in the Topographic livery. This is one available for download on flightsim.to, as is the Foxtrot 45 scenery, North Palm Beach County General Aviation Airport. So we're going to be flying out of here from North Palm Beach out over the ocean and to some sun and surf in the Bahamas. So come along with us. We'll get into this airplane, get it fired up, and get on our way. So the 310R is a pretty interesting airplane. Again, piston twin, very light airplane, developed in the 1950s, first flew in 1953. So this is an old Cessna airplane. It was produced over a number of years, from 1954 to 1980. Over 5,000 have been built. And it's popular with civilian users, also popular in military applications as a light utility airplane. We have the 310R, which is a late production model. Came in around 1975. You have two 285 horsepower Continental engines, a lengthened nose for added baggage capacity, and an increased maximum takeoff weight. Now, the distinctive features of this airplane, obviously the twin engines, and a relatively small cabin. It's, again, very similar in many ways to other airplanes of this type, like the Diamond DA62, if you're looking at the default. But it's pretty small compared to something like the FlySimware Cessna 414, which is a much larger airplane. Also, King Air would be a much larger comparison. We do have two fuel tanks. So the tip tanks here, these oblong things on the wingtips, are your fuel tanks, and they are the main fuel tanks. So that's a little bit unique. These wingtip tanks are going to be your main tanks. You also have an aux fuel tank for each as well. You also get the nice long kind of almost bay windows on the back to give you a good view for your passengers. So it is a very good good airplane, and Milviz has done a good job with the actual 3D model of it. You do have a little bit of external scenery as well. We've got wheel chocks and all of our intake covers and things on the airplane. Right now we'll control that from the inside. But let's hop into the cockpit, get this thing fired up. So into the cockpit of the 310R. To me, it feels a lot like the default Cessna non-G1000 version, so the steam gauge Cessna. It's just got that same gray. But you have your primary flight instruments up here, your six-pack. There are a number of options for your navigation suite, and then mostly engine controls out here on the right-hand side. If we pull up the tablet, you pull up the tablet by clicking on the pillar, and it has a lot of different options. So this is all of our doors and how we control the intake covers and stuff. So let's take all of this off. Control lock, just something that you remove before starting the engine. You can also fill it with passengers, and if you want to actually see the people, you can unhide the avatars. I like to hide them because I'm kind of a traditional simmer, but that's how you kind of control your weight and balance for the people. It also has an interesting thing where the so if you fill in the nose baggage, put in nose baggage, they put some suitcases in there. It's small things like that that really, I think, separate this from other airplanes. We can close that up. Another important thing that this comes is unique about the 310R is the passenger comfort index here. As we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get started, but this is a measure of how comfortable you are in the cabin. So you will have to think about some of your cabin air and how hot and cold it is. It's pretty warm here today at North Palm Beach, so that's why we're in the yellow. I'm coming down. We've got about 50% fuel. I'm going to actually fuel up all the way in the main tanks, keep half in the aux tanks. You can also change your dirt level. So if we wanted to make this thing really dirty, we could, and you'll see it adds just a lot of wear and tear to the surface of the engine. So that's cool. And again, that kind of increments over time if you use the same tail numbers. If you set up this setting. So again, lots of cool settings. Moving on through the settings, because we're here to look at the tablet, really. All of our avionics suites, you get the GTN 720. You can do the TDS GTN 750XI, similar kind of setup here. You can do your radio navigation if you just want to go slant alpha. Or you can do the default SOT mode GNS. I use the free version of the GTN 750. I think that's the best, most capable one. You can also swap out your primary instruments for Garmin G5s. These are just kind of small mini glass displays. I find those are hard to read in sim. Only reason why I don't use them. You also have initial state, so we own this airplane. You could also rent it, and that just means that some of the switches might be a little randomized when you get into it, because who knows what the last guy was doing it. Finally, you have realism options, so we want all of our realism on, wear and tear, engine realism, and it's all tied to the tail number you're actually using in Flight Sim. So you can have multiple different airplanes, and that's a really cool thing. The persistence of it is a fun thing for someone who flies general aviation repeatedly. And then we'll put rarely, that's the most realistic failures mechanism. And then here, if you do this, you can inspect your airplane and just see, right now it's all good, all green, but if we come in and initialize it, you'll see it'll start us off with, we've got some spark plugs that, you know, in the left engine that are going a little bit yellow. So that just shows you all the different things that can fail in the airplane in terms of these components. So enough talking. Let's get this thing fired up and get on our way. Now, I use the checklist basically that comes with the airplane in the user guide. And if you're interested in more about how you actually fly the thing, and hit all the switchology of it, we do have a video on our channel going through a full VFR flight of this airplane that'll go through all that. All right, so altimeter was 3009. We'll punch that in. When there, as we heard, winds 120 at around 16 knots. So we will be taxiing to runway 9. So the 310R is a pretty capable airplane. You can get up to 160, 170 knots in the cruise, but you are going to, it's a small plane, so your engines are going to be working as hard as they can if you've got full fuel and a bunch of passengers. So we're going to taxi out onto runway 9 right. Once we taxi out that way, we'll basically fly runway heading for a little bit and then go left to pick up our waypoints. We're going to take off. We're going to rotate. We're going to basically let the speed come up to about 80 knots at the red line, 90 knots, 80 to 90 knots. We can think about rotating, and then we'll be off the ground at 100 or so. So for takeoff, we're just going to go full power forward, holding on the brakes, and release. If you do need more performance, you can use your flaps. But we shouldn't need it today. Alright, so on takeoff, we need to bring our power back into the green arc. Make sure that we bring our propeller RPMs back too. Make sure everything's in the green arc. We can also lean out the mixture a little bit. And then at that point, we're going to turn towards our magenta line on our GTN 750 and get on our way to our first waypoint, which is going to be Clubs. So we'll climb up to about 5,500 feet. And just kind of keep the power all the way in until we get up that high. So we're climbing out now over Palm Beach, and again, very capable airplane. You've got a range of about 800 nautical miles, and again, a max speed of 190 knots. But it's a good mix of kind of traditional steam gauge general aviation, but with the something like the GTN 750, it's perfectly capable of flying on VATSIM and doing all the things you would need to do in that situation. Also, it's a twin-engine airplane, so that opens up all of the single-engine procedures that you would need if you're interested in procedures and things like that. That's all good to practice as well if you want to dig into this airplane. So there's a lot of depth. Now that we're up in the air too, we can take a look at our passenger comfort index. So actually, the cabin is warm but cooling slowly. So we're up a little high. We're going to probably need a little bit of heat. And this panel down here is one you'd probably usually ignore in a plane, or it would be an up. But we're not going to. So basically, you can control your temperature. We want to keep it a little cool, but not too much, and open up a little bit of cabin air, but not too much, and we'll put it on heat. Now, if you leave it on heat and don't open any of these knobs, you can overheat the heater and break it, so then it won't work, and your passengers won't be comfortable. We want to keep it in the green, but it's a small thing. It doesn't really impact anything, but it does encourage you to think about some other systems on the airplane that you wouldn't normally. That's what's cool about that for me. So we departed out of Florida. We're going to fly over the Atlantic Ocean a little bit until we hit Freeport on the Grand Bahama Island. Once we get there, just to get us over some land, then we'll turn south and fly the next about 100 miles down to Nassau International on New Providence Island. So we're taking a little bit of a more circuitous route, but it keeps us over some land and some islands and some alternate airport destinations. Again, not that I'm expecting any engine failures, but high fidelity plane like this, you never know. So we're just over Grand Bahama now, about halfway to our ultimate destination in Nassau. And yeah, so far so good. Nice clear day, a little bit of clouds, a little bit windy. And I'm having some kind of control issue where my autopilot won't kick in. So we're hand flying today, and it is, this is a fun plane to hand fly. It really is. This plane is also really just one of my favorites for Microsoft Flight Sim that's come out. I would say it's probably my primary general aviation plane if I'm going to hop on VATSIM and fly somewhere. This is probably the one. I mean, it's this or the Just Flight Piper Arrow, which is more of a single engine thing. So if I want something capable, something fast, want to get there at 190, 180 knots, this is what I'm probably taking. It's an excellent model. It feels very good to fly. It also feels a little bit unique. It handles a little bit different to some other general aviation planes you may have flown, especially in Flight Sim. Planes, I think, have a reputation for being somewhat floaty on final, and we'll demonstrate this when we get down there, but this plane is not. You really need to keep the power in very much close to the ground until you're in your very last bit of flare. Otherwise, you're going to smack into the ground, and it's just the bottom's going to drop out from you. So in that, it's a little bit different from some other planes you may have flown, and that's interesting. It's an interesting little bit of a learning curve that you have to get used to. It's also the small things like the passenger comfort. I wish we had that in airliners and stuff like that, just because it's one thing that's small, but it's another system to interact with. Similarly to radios. We don't really care about radios if you're not flying on VATSIM or something like that. But when you are, it adds that extra thing in the airplane model to interact with. I also love the state-saving options, the rental versus owned. Just again, it makes you feel like I have a responsibility to clean this thing up, or otherwise I'm going to put myself in a bad situation, and I should go through all my checklists and check all the switches and knobs and make sure they are where I think they are. Just that little bit of uncertainty, I think, adds a lot to the experience of hopping in and flying this thing. And then again, this is a twin-engine airplane, so you obviously have a world of single-engine things you can look at, emergency operations. There's just kind of some more depth to those kinds of procedures that you don't have with a single-engine airplane sometimes. So all that to say, it's a fun GA plane. It's probably my favorite GA plane in the sim at the moment as of mid-2022. There are, a lot of good airplanes out there. But I really like the panel. I think this is kind of my perfect blend of steam, gauge, and glass. And I just think the options, the persistence, you really can't beat it for a lot of GA flying. So as we cruise out over the Great Blue Sea, a couple things you need to know about this airplane. The biggest one that I think will not catch you out necessarily, but catch you out, is landing. If you land it the same way you land everything else, if you approach it like flying the default Cessna, you're going to smack this thing into the ground. Again, the key I've found is just to keep the power in probably a little longer than feels right. So, you don't want to pull the power back when you're too high, and then yeah, flare until you hear the stall horn, and you'll be all right. It may not sound or look pretty when and you'll see when we come up to land, but it may slam itself down onto the ground, and that's okay. As far as I can tell, that's also fairly realistic for a 310R. It just comes with the landing gear design. Not that it is a hard landing, but it does feel and look a little bit harder because the gear's not doing you any favors. So don't beat yourself up if you feel like you can't land this thing as smoothly as other airplanes. You can definitely do it, but you can get a safe landing, and but it takes a little bit of technique and a little bit of practice, which I appreciate in an airplane. And the other big thing, again, it's just an attention to detail thing, making sure you're paying attention to switches, and making sure you're paying attention to your engine parameters. I blew out one engine on on one of our live streams, actually, which was not great, but we learned some stuff. So again, when you're taking off, you'll go full power, but if you leave it full power, you will burn up the engine. So pull the power back, make sure you're in the green arcs for your prop RPM and for your manifold pressure, and you'll be pretty well set up for the rest of the way. Not super crazy complex, but it does take a little bit of management. Finally, just understanding what persistence options you have on, and again, making sure that you're checking all the switches, that they are in fact in the places that you think they are, especially things like cowl flaps and alternate air, because that could rob you of some power in pretty critical flight situations. So we're about 94 miles now from Mike Yankee November. That's Nassau International. We will come into land there. I'm planning on, I believe, runway 14. Weather is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, scattered clouds, 17 knot wind at 150, 6.5 mile visibility. There's a cloud layer at about 2,500 feet. So we'll have to avoid that. We'll see if that manifests in sim. But altimeter is going to be 3012. So you can start to see we're coming up on some more islands out in front of us. We're getting close. And if you're looking for something similar to this, maybe you're not sold or whatever, any of the piston twins are going to provide you a similar something kind of experience. The DA62, which we've talked about, with the DA62X mod, pretty good. Also gives you more of a glass cockpit feel, less steam gauge, but that's a good default airplane. You also have the default the twin Baron that they have by Asobo. As far as payware airplanes, you have the FlySimware Cessna 414, which is basically this but bigger, more on a scale of a King Air than this. So it's a similar kind of layout, just again kind of sized up a bit. So if you like this one, you like the idea of want something bigger, that would be what you'd go for. Obviously, if you're looking for something bigger, a bigger twin, the King Air would be another option. As far as other similar experiences, if you're looking for high fidelity general aviation, just flight arrows, the Piper Arrow, the Turbo Arrows, you can't go wrong with any of those. And there's also a few others. The Kodiak 100 is another good general aviation plane. Again, more glass focused than this. Milviz also has a Porter PC-6 that I've heard good things about. I haven't flown that one personally. So those are all your options if you enjoy something like this or you're looking for other solid general aviation options. So for our descent, we're going to be heading on to the RNAV. We're going to plan for the RNAV for runway 14 into Nassau. We're going to head to HECOP, Hotel Echo Kilo Oscar Papa, and then go to Laps. At Laps, we want to be at 2,000 feet, and then at or above 1,600 feet at HUTEX, Hotel Uniform Tango Echo X-Ray. And from there, we'll just go straight into runway 14. This thing is fully capable of whatever ILS approaches you want to do, as well as RNAV. You do have glide slope indication here on your HSI when you're programming that in. So you can get all the kind of goodies that you would want with your ILS approaches and your precision approaches in an IFR flight. Perfectly VATSIM capable, especially with the GTN 750. Or if you want to do some slant alpha or whatever. All right, so we're down at around 2,000 feet, getting ready to make our visual approach for runway 14. Gonna double check the weather real quick. Wind is 160 at 14. So that's still well within bounds for us right now. We're basically gonna align with our course here once we pass laps at 2,000, and then we'll get on in. I also want to start slowing down. So once I'm in the white arc, I'm pretty much good. I think it's 138 knots for gear and the first notch of flaps. Or the first notch of flaps is 138. Gear's a little bit higher at around 150. So once we're down there, we can go ahead, give it the first notch of flaps, and drop the gear. They will be effective speed brakes. And then we'll dial in our final approach course, which will be 143. So if we come down to our HSI, 1, 2, 1, 4, and a little bit of change. So that's 143 on our final approach course. And from there, we'll really just bring it downhill. But this is probably the trickiest part of flying this airplane, I would say. So we're now on about a 5-mile final for the runway. Speed is looking pretty good, 110 knots or so. So we're going to keep bringing the power back, let ourselves continue to descend, and let the speed come on back again. For approach speed, generally, I shoot to be between 90 and 100, 80 to 90. But again, if you're kind of between the red line and 100 knots, you're going to be probably okay. But keeping up some speed is not the worst thing in this airplane. So I aim for around 90 knots. And then once we cut the power, we'll go down to around 80 knots. Stall speed's going to be around 77-ish. So careful once you get close to the red line. It's also going to take a bit of power fully configured for landing. So once we get the last notch of flaps out, which is out around 100 knots, you'll be all right. All these numbers are available in the handbook that comes with it, which is a nice feature. But once you're fully configured, it does take a lot of power to keep going. You'll see we're at around 23 inches of manifold pressure. And we're just we're still not maintaining altitude and still below 100 knots. So again, once you're all configured, these engines aren't going to power your way out of a bad situation like this. That's one of the things that makes this airplane kind of interesting, is that it's not overpowered for its size. But so far, we're looking all right. And this is an international airport for big jets, so we should have plenty of runway. So we're a bit low on the poppies, but that's all right. We're coming downhill now. And again, I just want to keep the power in probably a little bit longer than you're used to as we get down close to the runway. Keep managing our descent rate. But it handles nicely. But once you start getting slow, it gets a little bit unwieldy. Again, all feels for a big, not a big, but for a small fast twin, it just feels at this stage of flight a little underpowered. You're not going to power your way out of a really bad spot. We can let the nose come down a little now. Still a bit low, but looking all right. So there's the threshold. Just keeping power in, and then just kind of gently pull it out as we flare. And we're on the ground. So welcome everybody to Nassau. we're going to take the first left taxiway and taxi on up to some parking. So, welcome to the sunny Bahamas. And like I was saying, the landings, that one was kind of a textbook one. Wasn't too bad. It feels bad because it's real hard to hold the airplane on its rear wheels when you come down. Once you hit, it really wants to bring the front wheel down. That long landing gear does do any favors. That looks like a hard landing if you're flying anything else, but in this one, it was around 200 feet per minute, so it was not terribly bad. So, all that to say, it's a fun plane with its quirks and its challenges, and I really like flying it. It's kind of my go-to general aviation plane at the moment. There are a lot of great ones out there, though, so definitely check them out. But just the piston twinness of it gives it a lot of capability. It can go far, it can carry stuff, and it can go relatively fast. But it's not without its limitations, especially, again, when you're coming into land, you really feel it's not an airplane that you're going to power out of a lot of bad stuff. So that's it for watching. Thank you all for sticking around with us as we took this 866 Tango Whiskey down to the Bahamas. If you have any questions, comments, anything, places you've flown fun in the Cessna 310R or in anything else, drop in the comment section below. As always, this has been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.